I'm very pleased to be here on My Magical Thing with Jeff Howard, Ludomancer, Technomage, and Associate Professor of Games and Occulture at the University of Falmouth. Jeff, it's lovely to have you here, mate.
Cool. It's really good to be here, Julian. I'm finally glad to be on My Magical Thing. It's an awesome show.
Well, it's a delight to have you. And at this point, Jeff, I must ask, please may we see your magical thing?
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so here it comes. All right, so this is a six-fingered hand from the role-playing game Invisible Sun. So this is what we're looking at. It's crafted out of resin. It's got all kinds of strange inscriptions on it and little kind of nooks and crannies. And so a little bit of background on kind of, where this comes from. Invisible Sun is a role-playing game designed by a man named Monty Cook, and I always have to say, in sort of tribute to his genius, I think he's the best tabletop role-playing game designer kind of in the world right now. And he made this game called Invisible Sun, and Invisible Sun is a role-playing game. So an RPG in the same way that Dungeons and Dragons is an RPG. So that idea of people kind of sitting around a table and imagining a fiction together and using rules to sort of govern that fiction. But unlike Dungeons and Dragons, which is kind of a fantasy simulator where you're kind of pretending to be like a Tolkien, mage or a fighter or something like that, Invisible Sun is sort of surrealism, the role-playing game. To the point that it actually opens, the rule book opens with a quotation from Andre Breton's Surrealist Manifesto. And so the idea of it, the premise is that players play as Visli, and Visli are sort of sorcerers who have been exiled from a realm of Platonic abstractions and cast down into the world of shadow, which of course is our world. It's this kind of mundane, physical world. And so the game is about your kind of homecoming into your realm of Platonic abstraction. So you go to this city of Satyrine, which is the city of notions under the indigo sun. And the idea is that there's all these different colored suns, and in fact, there's a sort of path of suns, which is kind of the Kabbalistic tree of life, but it's been rebuilt for this game. One of the things I love about this game is it creates its own magical mythology. It creates its own kind of fiction of the way magic operates. But the notion of this six-fingered hand is that it is called the Testament of Suns. And so anybody in the game who is a user of magic, which is everybody in the game because it's a game about magic, sort of carries this with them as a reminder of the sun beyond the visible, of the invisible sun. And what's kind of going on with it is that it's like a lot of kind of systems of ceremonial magic that have correspondences that run through them, where you have symbols that correspond to symbols, colors that correspond to letters that correspond to actions, and this kind of thing. So what happens is the six fingers on this hand represent sort of mantric syllables, kind of mantras. So they go kor, da, hu, ka, la, there. And everything in the game is kind of built around those magical syllables. And I love this idea of building a system around symbols that correspond to parts of the body that correspond to colors, because that's sort of a very Golden Dawn thing, but it's a very cultist Sabbatai thing. Like I kind of, I study and work a little bit within that tradition, and that's got its own kind of metric syllables that also correspond to colors that also correspond to these things. So right there, we're kind of starting with this very interesting kind of hermetic foundation, but it sort of goes further than that, because each of these mantras that are associated with each of the fingers of this hand are keyed into aspects of creating a fictional character. So, kind of your character's motivation and the order that they work with in terms of their kind of magical order and their key personality trait and so on and so forth. Corresponds to each of these mantras and their associated colors. So, like a lot of magic systems, there's a kind of mnemonic system, a system of memory that's kind of built into this hand. But what I also love about it is that it's kind of blurring the lines between what's inside the story and what's outside of the story, what's kind of diegetic and extra diegetic, to use that kind of narrative theory language. So it's both an artifact that characters in the game carry with them, but also something that you use to play the game I love that it's a left hand, to kind of imply a little bit of left hand path energy that's going through it. I love that it has six fingers. So it's got that kind of sense of bodily eeriness of the body, aspects of the body that go beyond the normal five fingers that we usually have. It always reminds me of Hannibal Lecter, who the character who has polydactyly, so he's got an extra finger. I like the physical design of the object, in the sense that it's got one of the paradoxes that for me I really enjoy in magical practice, which is that it stands for something very ethereal. It stands for this invisible sun, this light of a world that's beyond the world. But it's also a really hefty, solid physical object. I wish that I could just hand it to people and let them kind of hold it. But it's made out of this beautiful sort of resin. It's got a real weight to it. It's not flimsy like a lot of kind of, game components, and it's very functional. So one of the things you do in the game is you have these circular tarot cards, this deck of 60 circular tarot cards called the Sooth deck. And whenever somebody casts magic, the first time they do it, you sort of slot one of the cards into the hand, and it's got this nice slot, so it sort of sits here, and then that kind of casts its influence over the game. So while you're playing the game, the game feels very sort of ritualistic, and that sense of ritual is heightened by the mystery of this object. Like I was looking around my house and I was thinking, what is my most magical object in the house? What should I bring today? And I had some other candidates. I've got bits of bone, and I've got metal spikes, and I've got things that are associated with sort of real world historical covens and this sort of thing. But I started thinking, what makes an object magical, and what makes an object magical for me is its sense of mystery, its sense that there's something implied in the object. There's layers of meaning that I can't quite grasp, that are sort of beyond, my ability to fathom with my rational mind. So there's all these secret alphabets that are, kind of inscribed,
Yes.
on the base of this thing. There's there's like a monogram that's got the symbols of this goddess named Visla, who we don't know much about. She's kind of the ultimate mystery of the game Invisible Sun. So it's almost fractal in its sense of mystery. There's like mysteries inside of mysteries inside of mysteries. And so, the thing that this got me kind of thinking about is, as I was kind of indecisively hovering between these various magical things that I could kind of bring in, I was like, well, I should show them something real. I should show them like a real historical magical object. But then I started thinking about that, and I started thinking, what is real magic? And as you have articulated very well, in various formats. Magic is often about sort of liminal states of mind, liminal states of consciousness, liminal states of reality, and kind of questioning what is real, and questioning, whether our senses are kind of giving us the full version of reality. And I started thinking that magic is play, and play is magic, in the sense that magic is sort of enacted metaphor. It's acting out through a sequence of gestures and words and colors and all of these things, a vision of the way reality could be, something that reality is sort of like. And that got me thinking about Kenneth Grant. I'm going to wrap this up. I'm coming into the home stretch here, Julian. But the thing I'm thinking about, I've been reading a lot of Kenneth Grant, kind of in relationship to the way that the Typhonian current intersects with the Sabbatic current, the way that Grant's work and Chumbley's work kind of intersected. And Grant is really interested in fiction, and he's really interested in the magic of fiction, because he's got these ideas of sort of universe B, of this other universe that's out there, that we're trying to invite through a portal into this world. And one of the things that he's playing around with is the idea that something can be non-existent but also real. There's all this play with being and non-being that kind of runs through Grant, I think in part because of his sort of Hindu influence, that he's operating within. But he sort of implies at various points that fiction is one of the ways that that we can describe non-existent things as real. That's sort of what fiction is. Fiction is the act of describing non-existent things as real, and therefore can operate as a kind of portal, to bring sort of extra mundane forces into the world. And I started thinking, Grant never says it. I haven't been able to find him talking about games, but we could think of play as a way of acting as if non-existent things are real. It is a kind of act of make-believe, and that got me thinking about somebody that I often come back to, Lionel Snell. The famous chaos magician, sometimes goes by Ramsey Dukes, who argues in his book, My Years of Magical Thinking, that the magician operates in the games layer. The magician operates in the games layer, and the games layer is a kind of layer of meta reality that's above all Platonizing interpretations of reality. So Snell's kind of argument is that magic is a survival skill, and it's connected to the act of play, in that the magician is able to sort of occupy a particular view of reality because it helps him or her to solve a problem at a given moment. So you need to be in a kind of Newtonian materialist space to get your car to operate, then that's the kind of space you need to be in. But the magician can recognize that these various paradigms are arbitrary, that they can be shifted between, that no one of them can claim to be kind of the ultimate Platonic vision of things. I love that idea of the games layer, and it makes me think about Dungeons and Dragons, and the way that Dungeons and Dragons from the beginning, almost from the beginning, had these ideas of the astral plane and astral projection and the silver cord, and things that we kind of know Gary Gygax was taking from Theosophic lore. He was taking them from Doctor Strange comic books, which were in turn derived from kind of LSD lore and the Tibetan Book of the Dead and all of these sorts of things. And I think that when games talk about alternate realms of existence, when they talk about invisible suns and the lights of different worlds and astral planes, this is the moment when they are closest to being sort of metaludic. When they are reflecting, they are games kind of thinking about themselves, games kind of reflecting on what it means to be a game. And so I love this object because to me it sort of emblematizes the intersection of magic and play, and the way that games can help us to think about different layers or aspects of reality, and the way that gaming is sort of its own plane of reality, or lets us kind of prepare to think about these other realities. So anyway, this is why this is my magical thing. I have many possible magical things, but this is the one I felt most comfortable and excited about talking about. So that's what I got.
Oh, Jeff, my friend, that is delicious. Could we have another closer look at this remarkable magical object, which very much betokens that idea of, yeah, play as an involvement with that kind of fictional game, the gaming layer, the kind of that this is the active practice of magic as practice, and also for me personally, I remember back in the day getting involved in D&D, which was, ironically not my gateway drug to magic because I'd already found magic. And then finding that in D&D there were symbols that I didn't recognize, that were not part of the orthodox Western magical tradition canon. And they were more occult for me than the occult symbols. Because I kind of went, oh yeah, these are the planetary glyphs, these are the symbols of the zodiac, blah, blah, blah. But what is this stuff that Gygax has put into this? And this object points towards that. So Jeff Howard, thank you so much for sharing your magical thing. That's most appreciated, my friend. Really, really
Thank you.
is.
Thank you for having me on, Julian. I really enjoyed it.
Cheers, my friend.
Cheers to you.